Welcome back to the Book Talk Fever. Today we have an insane corporate revenge story where entitled coworkers try to steal our OP's car, entirely unaware her dad practically owns the company. Grab your snacks, and let's dive right into the drama. The people I was carpooling with wanted to kick me out. The only problem, it was my car. Since 3 of my colleagues lived in my neighborhood, I suggested we carpool to work. To keep things from feeling awkward. Or like they owed me a massive favor. I told them the driver, Arthur, was a distant relative who happened to work nearby. I had Arthur charge them a rate that was barely more than a bus pass. Was a steal, considering it saved them 2 hours of transit time. And kept them out of the grueling Seattle rain. For 2 months. Everything was smooth. Or so I thought. Then came today. I was in a stall in the office lounge. When I heard whispering near the sinks. I did some digging. A male voice said. Mark from sales. A private car service for this route usually costs $200 a day. We're paying $50 between the 3 of us. If we could just get one more person in that 4th seat. And charge them $50, our own ride would be free. The other 2 chimed in with murmurs of agreement. After a beat of silence, Mark spoke again. Why don't we just cut Riley loose? She's always acting so precious about the car. Telling us to be careful with the upholstery. Like she owns the place. If she's gone, we can actually relax. I'm in. Jessica added, her voice sharp. I'm sick of that better than you vibe she gives off. Let her go back to squeezing onto the light rail with everyone else. Where she belongs. I leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the stall door. And let out a silent, jagged laugh. Me on the light rail. They had no idea it was my car. The conversation continued. Dripping with a casual cruelty that made my skin crawl. We haven't paid for next month yet. Mark said. Let's just tell her we're done carpooling. Force her to drop out on her own. Exactly. Jessica giggled. And that story about the driver being her relative? Who actually believes that? They barely speak to each other in the car. God, the look on her face when she thinks she's been dumped. Mark laughed. She acts like she's the queen of the office. I already texted Arthur. He said he'd keep the same price for the rest of us. I felt a chill. That had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They didn't know the car was a graduation gift from my parents. They didn't know. Arthur had been my family's driver since I was in pigtails. I'd started this out of pity. One morning after a storm, I'd seen Mark and the others walk into the office. Looking like drowned rats. Mentioned they lived in a remote suburb to save on rent. Which meant a soul-crushing 2-hour commute each way. My parents had bought a house for me in that same area. Not because they wanted me in the suburbs. But because I liked the quiet. They insisted Arthur keep driving me for safety. Out of a genuine desire to help. I offered them a ride. I cut their commute from 2 hours to 30 minutes. Door to door. To protect their pride. I lied, saying it was just a relative's car. And they were doing me a favor by filling seats. Back then, their faces had been masks of pure gratitude. Riley, you're a lifesaver. Jessica had said, clutching my arm. I knew you were the sweetest person in this department. Mark had even clapped me on the shoulder. If you ever need anything, kid, you come to me. I've been at this firm the longest. I've got your back. I realized now that my kindness hadn't bought me friends. It had only bred resentment. I wasn't a benefactor. I was an obstacle to a free ride. I took a breath, composed myself, and stepped out of the stall. I walked to the sink and began washing my hands. As if I hadn't heard a word. The 3 of them jumped. Panic flared in their eyes for a split second. Before they masked it with practiced corporate indifference. I saw Mark catch Jessica's eye in the mirror. Mark was the one to break the silence. Hey, Riley. We were actually just talking about you. The 3 of us decided we're going back to the train next month. It's cheaper, so we're out of the carpool? I looked at him, feigning confusion. But the carpool is barely more expensive than the transit pass. It was $50 a day for 3 people. Roughly $16 each. The light rail was $12 round trip. When you factored in the time they saved. And the fact that they were no longer getting docked for being late. On rainy days. We're actually saving money with me. Not to mention, if someone stayed late, I tell Arthur not to charge them for the day. The gas alone cost more than what they were paying. Jessica stepped forward, her voice a sickly, sweet imitation of concern. We're just trying to be responsible. Riley. We're working class. You know. Every dollar counts. Since we're dropping out, it wouldn't be fair for you to bear the cost of the car alone. You should probably just join us on the train. I looked at her, seeing the predatory gleam in her eyes. They weren't going to the train. They were going to tell Arthur they'd negotiated. And try to leave me at the station. I think I'll keep the car, I said quietly. I enjoy the comfort. If you're out, I'll just tell Arthur not to pick you up tomorrow. Mark's face tightened. Jessica gripped his arm. Stepping into my personal space. Riley, be realistic. Your salary isn't that high. $15 a month for a private car? That's a massive burden for a girl like you. You're young. She continued, her tone patronizing. Like a mother lecturing a toddler. You shouldn't be so obsessed with luxury. To her. Commute builds character. Don't be lazy. I pretended to think about it for a moment. Tilting my head. You're right. It is a lot of money. But I guess I'm just a fan of luxury. I'll keep the ride since you are done. I'll let Arthur know he doesn't need to stop at your places anymore. The third member of their group, Natalie, finally spoke up. Natalie was the one I'd considered a real friend. Riley, honestly. We don't really want to ride with you anymore anyway. Unless you're willing to cover our portion of the fee. As a thank you for our company. We're done with you. The other two nodded aggressively. If you were smart, you'd pay for us to stay. Mark added. Otherwise. Enjoy the rain, princess. I stared into Natalie's eyes. She actually looked indignant. 6 months ago, Natalie had botched a major data set. For a $5 million acquisition. The client had been ready to walk. I stayed up for 48 hours straight. Fixing her errors and rewriting the proposal. I'd even put her name on the final slide so she wouldn't get fired. She had sobbed into my shoulder afterward. Riley. You're my guardian angel. I owe you my life. I'll never forget this. Memory is a fickle thing, apparently. Looking at her now, I saw no gratitude. Only the cold, hard calculation of someone who thought they found a way to win. This was the backstab my father had warned me about. He always told me that unconditional kindness often leads to a sense of entitlement in others. I hadn't believed him. I believed him now. I see, I said. My voice trembling slightly. Not from sadness, but from a burgeoning, icy rage. Good to know. Natalie's face lit up with a triumphant smile. She reached out to pat my hand. I knew you were the most generous person in the office, Riley. I pulled my hand back before she could touch. I walked past them without another word. My heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. I sat at my desk and took a long, slow sip of hot tea until my heart rate leveled out. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I dialed Arthur. Yes. Miss Riley. Is everything all right? The carpool rate is going up. I said $200 a day, starting now. As you wish, Miss Riley. I hung up. If they wanted to play the game of market rates, they could pay them. They've forgotten what it was like to stand on a freezing platform at 6 a.m. They thought they were the masters of the universe. I was just getting started. I was deep into a quarterly report when the three of them suddenly surrounded my cubicle, looking like a lynch mob in business casual. Riley, did you tell Arthur to raise the price? Mark shouted, slamming his hand on my desk. I can't believe you. Jessica hissed. Two-faced much? I never realized how pathetic you actually were. Mark's face was beat. You call him right now and tell him to drop the price back down, or we're going to have a very serious problem. I didn't look up from my screen. I told you, he's a distant relative. He decided the extra mileage wasn't worth the low rate. If you have an issue, take it up with him. Jessica's voice hit a glass-shattering register. Take it up with him? You're the one who set this up. You acted like a big shot. And now you're trying to scam us? Are we just a paycheck to you this whole time? My silence only fed their fire. Natalie stepped forward, looking hurt again. Riley. I'm so disappointed. We were trying to be your friends and you treat us like fools. I felt a surge of nausea. If I hadn't heard them in the bathroom, I might have actually felt guilty. It's work hours, I said coldly. Go back to your desks. Mark's hand blurred. Crash. He swept my ceramic mug off the desk. It shattered against the floor. And a shard of porcelain sliced across my forearm. I gasped as a line of crimson began to bead on my skin. Mark froze for a second, then doubled down. Don't you dare try to play the victim. You probably moved your arm into it on purpose. The office went silent. Colleagues started peeking over their monitors. Are you crazy? Someone yelled from across the room. A few people rushed over with gauze, helping me wrap the cut. As the crowd gathered, Jessica took a breath and put on her best concerned citizen face. She raised her voice so the whole floor could hear everyone. We didn't want it to come to this. But Riley has been running a scam. She recruited us for a carpool at a low rate. And now that she's got us hooked, she's quadrupled the price to line her own pockets. We just wanted an explanation. And Mark got a little heated. Because we're all struggling to make ends meet, while she plays games with our livelihoods. Mark nodded. She probably cut herself just to get me in trouble. Look at her, trying to extort us even now. The whisper started. The looks of sympathy from my co-workers turned into suspicious glares. Riley, that's not right. Someone muttered. You can't exploit your co-workers like that. The cut on my arm stung, but the coldness in my chest was worse. I had given these people everything. My time, my car, my protection. And they had turned it into a weapon to destroy my reputation. I reached into my pocket and hit a speed dial button. Dad. I whispered when he picked up. How does the firm handle employees with severe character and integrity issues? When the clock hit 5, I walked down to the parking garage. As I reached for the passenger door of the black sedan, a hand shoved me back. You don't get to ride. Mark growled. Not until you fix the price. Natalie stood behind him, her voice trembling with fake pity. Riley. It's pouring rain out there. Your wound will get infected. Just be a big girl, pay our fees for the month. And we'll let this go. I looked at her. Really looked at her, and felt like I was going to lose my lunch. The hypocrisy was suffocating. I ignored them and reached for the handle again. This time Mark lunged to grab my shoulder. But a large, solid figure stepped between us. Arthur. He didn't say a word, but his presence was a wall. He tucked me behind him. Arthur. Let's go home, I said. Of course, Miss Riley. The three of them froze. Mark took a hesitant step back. His bravado evaporated instantly in the shadow of Arthur's imposing frame. Arthur did not look like a standard corporate driver. He had the broad shoulders and disciplined posture of a man who had seen active combat. The tailored cut of his dark wool suit did nothing to hide the solid muscle underneath. Jessica nervously adjusted the strap of her cheap designer knockoff bag. She avoided making eye contact with the man who was currently blocking their path. Natalie just stared at the damp concrete floor. She suddenly seemed very interested in a puddle of dirty water near her uncomfortable heels. Arthur did not raise his voice. He did not even change his perfectly neutral expression. He simply reached out and opened the heavy rear door of the sedan for me. The hinges glided silently. The warm glow of the plush leather interior invited me in. Please, Miss Riley, Arthur said softly. His deep voice echoed slightly in the cavernous expanse of the parking garage. I stepped into the back seat without a second glance at the three of them. The rich scent of cedar and expensive leather enveloped me. It was a scent that had always meant safety to me since I was a little girl. Arthur shut the door behind me with a solid, satisfying thud. He walked around the front of the vehicle with measured, deliberate steps. Through the tinted glass, I watched Mark open his mouth to say something. Mark probably wanted to hurl another insult or make another hollow threat. Arthur paused and simply turned his head to look at him. It was a brief, piercing stare that conveyed absolute authority. Mark snapped his mouth shut. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. Arthur slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The powerful motor purred to life with a low, intimidating growl. He smoothly shifted the car into drive. We pulled out of the parking space, leaving the three of them standing awkwardly in the dim fluorescent light. I watched them shrink in the rearview mirror. They were stranded in the garage with a 2-hour transit nightmare ahead of them. The skies outside were already opening up. A torrential Pacific Northwest downpour began to lash against the concrete pillars. "Are you all right, Miss Riley?" Arthur asked. He glanced at me through the interior mirror. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the hastily wrapped gauze on my forearm. A small patch of crimson had already seeped through the white fabric. "I'm fine, Arthur," I replied. My voice was surprisingly steady. "Just a little workplace accident." Arthur's jaw tightened. He gripped the leather steering wheel until his knuckles turned slightly white. "That did not look like an accident," he stated flatly. "I saw the way that man lunged at you." "It was Mark," I explained. "He got angry because I refused to let them exploit me anymore." "Would you like me to stop the car and have a brief conversation with him?" Arthur offered. There was a dangerous, protective edge to his polite tone. I actually smiled at the thought of Mark trying to stand up to Arthur. "No, thank you," I said. "I think I need to handle this through the proper channels." "As you wish," Arthur conceded. "But please let your father know immediately. He takes your safety very seriously." My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out to see a text from my father. It simply read, "Call me back right now." I took a deep breath and hit the dial button. My father answered on the first ring. "Riley, what happened?" he demanded. His voice was sharp and commanding. It was the voice he used when closing billion-dollar acquisitions. It was not the gentle tone he usually reserved for his only daughter. "It's a long story, Dad," I sighed. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. I tried to be nice to some coworkers. I let them carpool with me because they lived out in the suburbs. I even subsidized the cost so they wouldn't feel bad. "And," my father prompted. "And today I caught them plotting in the bathroom," I continued. "They were planning to kick me out of my own carpool. They thought they could negotiate with my driver and take the ride for themselves." My father let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "They tried to steal Arthur from you?" he asked. "The man who has been on our family payroll for 20 years? "Yes," I confirmed. "They thought I was just some entry-level nobody stretching her paycheck for a luxury ride. They didn't realize who I was." "I told you, Riley," my father said softly. "You wanted to work from the ground up to prove yourself. I respected that decision. I allowed you to use a fake last name on your employment forms so no one would connect you to me. But I also warned you that the corporate world is full of parasites." "You were right, Dad," I admitted. My unconditional kindness only made them resent me. When I confronted them and told them the car was mine, they cornered me at my desk. The line went dangerously quiet. "They cornered you," my father repeated. Every syllable was laced with ice. "Mark from sales got physically aggressive," I explained. "He swept a ceramic mug off my desk. It shattered, and a piece of the porcelain cut my arm." I heard the sound of a heavy wooden chair scraping across the floor on the other end of the line. My father had stood up. "You are bleeding?" he asked. "It's just a scratch, Dad," I tried to reassure him. "It is not just a scratch when an employee assaults my daughter in my own building," he roared. Richard Vance was the founder and majority shareholder of Vance Global Industries. The marketing firm where I worked was just one of his many subsidiary holdings. Nobody at the regional office knew that the CEO's daughter was working in the data analytics department. I had wanted to earn my promotions through pure merit. I had wanted to learn the business without the shadow of nepotism hanging over my head. I had endured the grueling hours and the office politics just like everyone else. "I will have him arrested," my father declared. "I will have the entire HR department fired for allowing this environment to exist." "No, Dad, wait," I pleaded. "Let me handle this my way. I want to see how deep their lies go. They threatened to report me to HR for scamming them. I want them to dig their own graves before we bury them." My father was silent for a long moment. He was a strategist at heart, and he recognized a good trap when he saw one. "Fine," he finally agreed. "But I am flying back to Seattle tonight. I was supposed to be in New York until Friday, but my schedule is officially cleared. I will be at the regional office tomorrow morning at 9. If HR tries to discipline you, I want you to stall them until I walk through that door. Thank you, Dad, I said. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, he replied. Have Arthur clean that wound properly when you get home. He hung up. I settled back into the leather seat and watched the rain wash over the city streets. The storm outside was furious, but my mind was completely calm. I had spent months shrinking myself to make Mark, Jessica, and Natalie comfortable. I had downplayed my education, my background, and my resources just to fit in. I had done their work for them when they were too lazy or incompetent to finish it. That version of Riley was officially dead. The next morning, the sky was a bruised, heavy gray. The rain had not let up for a single second during the night. It was the kind of miserable, bone-chilling weather that made Seattle famous. Arthur was waiting for me in the driveway at exactly 6:30. He held a large black umbrella over my head as I walked to the car. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that I had previously hidden in the back of my closet. It was a bespoke piece that screamed generational wealth. I paired it with my mother's vintage pearl earrings. If I was going to face an HR tribunal, I was going to do it looking like the heir to the company. Good morning, Miss Riley, Arthur greeted me. Good morning, Arthur, I smiled. Are we expecting a pleasant commute today? He asked. I imagine the roads are quite terrible. They are, I agreed. But we don't have to make any extra stops today. We can drive straight to the office. Arthur offered a rare, slight smile. Excellent, he said. We merged onto the highway, gliding past miles of gridlocked traffic. The heated seats and the gentle classical music playing from the speakers made the ride incredibly peaceful. About 2 miles from the office, the traffic slowed near a major bus transfer station. I glanced out the tinted window. A massive crowd of miserable commuters was huddled under a tiny metal shelter. The wind was blowing the rain sideways, soaking everyone to the bone. Standing right at the edge of the curb were Mark, Jessica, and Natalie. Mark was holding a newspaper over his head, but it was already dissolving into mush. Jessica's cheap mascara was running down her cheeks in dark streaks. Natalie was shivering uncontrollably in a thin trench coat. They looked absolutely pathetic. A passing delivery truck hit a deep pothole right in front of them. A wave of muddy water splashed over the curb, drenching Mark from the waist down. I watched him throw his ruined newspaper onto the ground and scream in frustration. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I reached out and turned the volume of the classical music up just a little bit. Arthur pulled the car into the executive underground parking structure at Vance Global. I swiped my standard employee badge to get through the secondary doors. When I stepped onto the marketing floor, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Conversation stopped abruptly as I walked past the cubicles. People stared at my expensive suit and the neat white bandage on my arm. I ignored their whispers and walked straight to my desk. My computer had barely booted up when a shadow fell across my keyboard. It was Brenda, the director of human resources. Brenda was a stern woman who treated company policy like a sacred religious text. Riley, Brenda said coldly. I need you to come to my office immediately. Is there a problem, Brenda? I asked politely. We will discuss it behind closed doors, she insisted. She turned on her heel and marched away, expecting me to follow. I locked my computer screen and took my time walking to her office. When I opened the frosted glass door, I was not surprised to see my 3 former carpoolers already sitting there. Mark, Jessica, and Natalie were squeezed onto a small leather sofa. They looked like a group of drowned rats who had just been rescued from a storm drain. Their clothes were damp and wrinkled. They smelled faintly of wet wool and cheap coffee. Despite their miserable physical state, their faces were glowing with smug triumph. Mark had an obnoxiously large bandage wrapped around his right hand. He cradled it against his chest as if he had survived a war zone. Have a seat, Riley, Brenda gestured to a lone chair facing her desk. I sat down and crossed my legs elegantly. I smoothed the fabric of my skirt and waited. Brenda opened a manila folder and peered at me over her reading glasses. I am holding a formal grievance filed by Mark, Jessica, and Natalie, she began. They have accused you of extortion, creating a hostile work environment, and workplace violence. I raised a single eyebrow. That is quite a list, I noted calmly. It is not a joke, Riley, Brenda snapped. Mark claims that you have been running an illegal transportation hustle using company time to organize it. He states that you lured them into a carpool arrangement with a bait-and-switch pricing model. When they refused to pay your exorbitant new fees, you became aggressive. Brenda pointed a manicured finger at Mark. Mark says that during a confrontation yesterday, you shattered a ceramic mug. He claims the flying shrapnel injured his hand. He also claims you intentionally cut your own arm to frame him for the incident. I looked at Mark. He gave me a sneering, victorious little smirk. She is completely unhinged, Brenda, Jessica chimed in. We were just trying to be her friends. She used us to subsidize her luxury lifestyle because she lives beyond her means. And when we tried to politely decline her services, she threw a temper tantrum. Natalie dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. I was so scared, Natalie whispered. I thought she was going to attack us right there in the office. She even had some massive, scary thug waiting for us in the parking garage to intimidate us. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. Calling Arthur a thug was the funniest thing I had heard all week. Brenda slammed her hand on the desk. This is not a laughing matter, she shouted. Dance Global has a strict zero-tolerance policy for workplace violence and extortion. Given the severity of these allegations, I am prepared to terminate your employment effective immediately. I am also advising Mark to file a police report regarding the physical assault. I stopped laughing and looked Brenda dead in the eyes. Did you bother to check the security footage before drafting my termination papers? I asked. Brenda frowned, slightly thrown off by my absolute lack of panic. Mark informed me that the cameras in your section of the floor have been malfunctioning for weeks, she replied. He said the maintenance team was aware of it. I turned my gaze to Mark. Is that what you told her, Mark? I asked softly. You thought because the red recording light on the ceiling dome was burned out, the camera was broken? Mark's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second. It is broken, he insisted loudly. Everyone knows the IT department is too lazy to fix the cameras on our side of the building. Actually, they upgraded the entire system last month, I corrected him. They switched to infrared sensors. The red lights were disabled by default to prevent glare on the monitors. The cameras are rolling in pristine 4K resolution, 24 hours a day. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room. Jessica shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Natalie's fake tears suddenly stopped flowing. Brenda, I said, turning back to the HR director. Before you fire me, I highly suggest you call the IT director and ask for the footage from yesterday at 4:15. If I am truly an unhinged extortionist, you will want the video evidence to protect the company from a wrongful termination lawsuit. Brenda hesitated. She looked at Mark, who was suddenly sweating profusely despite his damp clothes. I don't need a video to know what happened, Mark blustered. 3 witnesses are telling you the exact same story. We are the victims here. Call IT, Brenda, I challenged her. Or I will. Brenda picked up her desk phone and dialed an extension. She spoke in hushed tones for a few moments before hanging up. The IT director is sending the file to my computer right now, she announced. The room was completely silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. Mark's leg began to bounce nervously. Jessica was furiously chewing on her lower lip. A small notification chime echoed from Brenda's computer monitor. She clicked her mouse and leaned forward. I watched the reflection of the video play out on the lenses of her glasses. I knew exactly what she was seeing. She was seeing the 3 of them surround my desk like a pack of hyenas. She was seeing Mark slam his hand down aggressively. She was seeing me sitting perfectly still, ignoring them. And then, she saw Mark forcefully sweep my mug off the desk. She saw the ceramic shatter. She saw me flinch and grab my bleeding arm. She saw Mark point his finger in my face and yell at me while I was bleeding. Brenda's face drained of all color. She slowly looked up from the monitor and stared at Mark. You lied to me, Brenda whispered. Her voice was trembling with a mixture of shock and professional terror. You assaulted a coworker, and then you lied to human resources to cover it up. Mark leaped up from the sofa. The video lacks audio, he shouted desperately. You don't know what she was saying to me. She provoked me. She was threatening my family. Before Brenda could formulate a response, the heavy wooden door to the HR office swung open. It did not just open, it was pushed open with the kind of force that commanded immediate attention. A tall, silver-haired man in a bespoke navy suit stepped into the room. He was flanked by the company's head of legal and 2 massive security guards. Brenda gasped and jumped up from her chair. Mr. Vance, she stuttered, her hands shaking. I did not know you were visiting the regional office today. Richard Vance did not even look at Brenda. His piercing blue eyes swept over the room and landed immediately on my bandaged arm. His jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Dad, I said softly, breaking the absolute silence. I told you I had this under control. Jessica let out a strange, high-pitched squeak. Natalie physically recoiled, pressing herself into the back of the sofa. Mark just stood there, his mouth hanging open in a comical display of pure shock. Dad? Mark echoed. His voice was barely a whisper. Dad? Richard Vance finally turned his gaze to the man who had injured his daughter. My daughter, Riley Vance, requested permission to work in this branch under an assumed name, my father explained. His voice was dangerously calm. She wanted to understand the culture of my company without the interference of executive privilege. It appears she has discovered a culture of entitlement, bullying, and gross incompetence. Brenda looked like she was going to faint. She gripped the edge of her desk to keep herself upright. Mr. Vance, I assure you, I was just handling a grievance report, Brenda babbled. I was about to dismiss these 3 employees based on video evidence of an assault. You were about to fire my daughter 3 minutes ago, Brenda, my father corrected her. Brenda swallowed hard and fell completely silent. My father stepped closer to the sofa. He looked down at Mark, Jessica, and Natalie with an expression of absolute disgust. You wanted to ride in a luxury car for pennies, he stated. You exploited a young woman's kindness because you thought she was beneath you. And when she established a boundary, you resorted to violence and slander. Mark raised his hands defensively. Sir, Mr. Vance, it was a misunderstanding, Mark stammered. We didn't know. We would never have treated her like that if we knew she was your daughter. I stood up from my chair and walked over to Mark. That is exactly the problem, Mark, I said coldly. You only respect people who have power over you. You thought I was just a regular administrative worker, so you treated me like garbage. You thought my time, my property, and my safety were yours to consume. I turned to Natalie. And you, I said, my voice dropping to a low register. I stayed up for 2 days fixing the data set for the Miller acquisition. You were going to cost this company $5 million because you didn't know how to run a basic pivot table. I saved your job, and you stood in the bathroom laughing about how I belonged on the train. Natalie burst into genuine, ugly tears. Riley, please, she begged. I'm so sorry. I was just going along with them. I didn't want to lose my friends. You don't have friends, Natalie, I told her honestly. You have co-conspirators. My father looked at the head of legal. Process their terminations immediately, my father ordered. Mark is fired for gross misconduct, physical assault, and falsifying a company report. Ensure our security team escorts him to the local police precinct. I am pressing criminal charges for assault and battery on behalf of my daughter. Mark's knees visibly buckled. One of the security guards stepped forward and grabbed him firmly by the upper arm. Jessica and Natalie are terminated for conspiracy to commit fraud and filing false HR reports, my father continued. Revoke their access badges, confiscate their company electronics, and escort them out of the building. Furthermore, ensure they are permanently blacklisted from all Vance Global subsidiaries. Jessica started hyperventilating. You can't do this, she screamed. We have rent to pay. We have lives. You should have thought about your rent before you tried to steal my ride, I replied coolly. Enjoy the light rail. The security guards pulled Mark toward the door. He looked back at me, his face pale and twisted with regret, but I just turned my back on him. Jessica and Natalie were marched out immediately after him. Their cries and protests echoed down the hallway for everyone on the marketing floor to hear. When the door finally closed, the room felt incredibly peaceful. My father turned to Brenda. Brenda was visibly trembling, waiting for the axe to fall on her neck as well. Brenda, my father said. Your willingness to blindly believe a coordinated lie without immediately checking the security footage is alarming. However, my daughter informs me that you have historically been a competent manager. You are on a 6-month probationary period starting right now. Do not ever let this department become a playground for bullies again. Yes, Mr. Vance, Brenda whispered gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Vance. I promise it will never happen again. My father nodded and turned to me. His stern corporate mask melted away, revealing the warm, loving dad I knew. Let's go get that arm checked by a real doctor, Riley, he said gently. Arthur is waiting out front. Okay, Dad, I smiled. I grabbed my purse and walked out of the HR office with him. As we walked across the marketing floor, the entire department was dead silent. Everyone was staring at us with wide, terrified eyes. They had just witnessed the three loudest, most arrogant people in the office get dragged out by security. And they had just learned that the quiet girl in the data department was royalty. I didn't mind the stares. I had finally learned the lesson my father had tried to teach me all those years ago. Kindness is a beautiful trait, but it must be protected by a wall of iron. If you give people access to your warmth unconditionally, they will eventually try to burn your house down. I stepped into the private executive elevator with my father. The door slid shut, cutting off the whispers of the office. When we reached the lobby, Arthur was standing by the glass doors with his umbrella ready. The perpetrators have been removed, Miss Riley? Arthur asked politely. They have, Arthur, I confirmed. Excellent, he replied. He opened the heavy glass door, shielding me from the torrential Seattle rain. Shall we head home? Yes, I said, stepping into the luxurious warmth of the car. Take the long way, please. I want to enjoy the ride. Wow, talk about a satisfying dose of instant karma. Those three coworkers absolutely got what they deserved. It's crazy how some people can take genuine kindness and twist it into entitlement, acting like you owe them the world just because you helped them out once. Riley's story is the perfect reminder that your kindness needs boundaries, and you should never let toxic people walk all over you. Have you guys ever dealt with workplace bullies like Mark, Jessica, or Natalie? Let me know your own crazy coworker stories down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily stories, and I'll see you in the next one.